Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our meeting of the BCP Cabinet. We've got some important things on the agenda today, and I look forward to getting to them. Before we move to that, where this is a virtual meeting, I do need to read out the virtual housekeeping notice. So please note that this meeting of Cabinet is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by myself as chairman. State your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Some people may need to dial into the meeting and will therefore not have the benefit of the visual. Mute your microphone when you're not talking. If you would like to speak, please use the raise your hand function in Teams. If there are any recommendations moved that require a formal vote, these will be carried out by myself as chairman, asking for a response of for or against from each councillor on the cabinet. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum as far as possible and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you. Okay, so we can move into the formal agenda now. So agenda item 1 is apologies. We have one apology from Councillor Karen Rampton. I've asked her to attend an LGA presentation on adult social care, which should be very important to us going forward. So we one apology there. Don't believe there are any other apologies, and in fact everybody else is present. So I'll move to agenda item 2, which is declarations of interest. So can I ask Cabinet members to show if I have any declarations of interest? Councillor Anderson, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to declare a disclosable public pecuniary interest in respect of item 11, sale of Christchurch bypass by virtue of my wife being an employed by Waitrose and a partner of Waitrose, and will not speak or vote on this item. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mark. That's great. Anybody else have anything they would like to raise under that item? No. Okay, so we move on to the confirmation of minutes from our previous meeting. So these have all been shared. Does anybody have anything they wish to raise? I'm very happy to propose adoption of those, and I look to Councillor Broadhead to second.
Yes, happy to second, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments on those? No, not seeing any hands raised, so I'm happy to accept those. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to agenda item 4, which is public issues. We haven't been advised of any public questions, statements or petitions received on this occasion, so we will move forward to agenda item 5, which is recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board. I'll bring the chair of the board in now, Councillor Bartlett. Steve, I appreciate we've got a recommendation on one of the papers. Is there anything else you would like to add at this stage, Steve?
Yeah, good morning, Leader. I'd like to make a request regarding the sale of the car park in Christchurch, in that the Overview and Scrutiny Board have put this on their agenda for discussion at its next meeting. But unfortunately, the council meeting has now been brought forward, which means that the council will make a decision on that prior to the next Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting, which means that the opportunity will not be there for the board to discuss the paper. The paper was specifically requested to be brought before the board by members from Christchurch, and the board agreed that we would discuss the paper at our last Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting on the 1st of March. Now, the subject did actually come up fairly late in the day. It was put on the cabinet plan just before the last Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting, which meant it couldn't go on the agenda for our last meeting. And now we're going to miss the opportunity to discuss it at our next meeting because the council meeting has been brought forward. So I would like to request that that item on the agenda is actually deferred until after the Overview and Scrutiny Board has sat and discussed it on the 1st of April. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. Appreciate that. I think what we're doing today is Cabinet is recommending to council effectively. There's 2 points in that. One, we can discuss offline whether then it recommends to a later cabinet, a later council meeting post scrutiny or not. We'd have to discuss with the property officer, the timeliness of that. But we can have that conversation. Also, secondly, it gives the agreement it's of the leader, effectively the portfolio holder, post council. So effectively, as long as we have some sort of engagement in the scrutiny process, it still leaves us a route to amend effectively that report. So what I'll propose is we'll take it through today, but then I will liaise with you and the officers, and we'll work out what the requisite next steps are after that. And we can always bring it, if we do delay it to a further meeting, we can always bring the recommendations back to this meeting as well, Steve. So hopefully that's acceptable. We'll work on that outside of this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item 6, which is the Community Infrastructure Levy neighbourhood portion, and we're going to Councillor Broadhead. Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'll try and keep my introduction on this brief, because we've had a lot of thank all members that have been involved in this process for doing so. We took this through to an all-member seminar and got some really useful feedback from that in the very initial stages back in December. We've had a very fruitful discussion on this at the most recent Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting as well. So I'll try not to spend too long on it. I will say up front that there are a number of points that were raised in the Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting and recommendations that have come forward, which I will be incorporating into further additional recommendations into this meeting. But with your permission, Chair, what I'll do is introduce the item, let the Overview and Scrutiny Board come in with a flavour of those recommendations, and I can address them afterwards rather than kind of stealing their thunder. That relates particularly to all of the issues that were raised there around the frequency of the panel meetings, the panel itself, as well as external councillor involvement. But the paper itself is regarding the neighbourhood portion of the Community Infrastructure Levy. And the Community Infrastructure Levy, as colleagues may know, is a development that's introduced by the Planning Act in 2008, which is a developer contribution to help infrastructure that is required for the development in certain areas. And the neighbourhood portion in particular is specifically designed in the SIL regulations that 15% in most areas, or 25% where there's a neighbourhood plan or town and parish councils in place, is to mitigate the direct impact of development in that specific area. So really, this is developer funds to help communities that have been directly impacted by development in their area. Now, the preceding authorities have had a number of ways of dealing with this. One of the authorities ring fence this on a ward basis. So they said, well, there's the area where the development's happening. Those are the people that are most affected. Therefore, they have that neighbourhood portion to spend for those people that have been most affected. The previous administration of BCP Council took a different approach and decided to take all of that money and put it into a central pot. And there are pros and cons to both. The pros to the ward-based method are that, as per the SIL regulations, the money is ring-fenced for those areas that have specifically been the hardest hit. There's a criticism of the bigger pot that you're then redistributing and taking money away from those areas that have been allocated this as per the regulations. Equally, the beneficial of a bigger pot is that there are a number of areas that do not attract much in terms of the SIL levy, and therefore not much in terms of the neighbourhood portion. Now, that's because they don't have much development, and there's an argument that therefore they don't need the funds to mitigate the impact of development. But of course, development touches us all, and while we have the bigger strategic pot to look at the much bigger parts of the SIL infrastructure, equally, we want to try and help everybody. So we've come up with what essentially is a hybrid model with two schemes. First, the scheme for those areas that do develop and collect a decent amount of SIL, and that will continue on a ward-based bidding process. Scheme 2 will allow bids from the communities that do not attract much into the of neighbourhood portion SIL to bid into the strategic pot. And we've got a panel that is spelled out in the paper, and I'll make some changes to later, that oversees how the money is spent. Chair, this is really important. There's £1 million of funds sat there at the moment, which is funds to be spent to help local communities communities, mitigate the impact of development. We can't kick this down the can any further. We want to release those funds so that we can get on and spend the money in the public. So, like I said, some further amendments to make a little bit later, but that's the crux of the scheme. We're trying to make sure that everybody is covered by this. So if you get still in your wards, it's there to be spent. If you don't, then you do have the ability to get some hands on some community funds as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. So effectively, you're proposing a stance, and then you'll reserve the right to amend as we go through this. Thank you. And I come to Councillor Anderson, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very happy to second this paper. I think it's a very good compromise between the two schemes we had in Bournemouth and in Poole. I like the idea, and I've always been very much in favour of the fact that if SIL's generated in a ward, then the locals in that area need to know what they want to spend their money on. And so I think that the fact that we are keeping that element is very good. And I also like the idea that we can have adjoining wards bidding for funds. I mean, particularly in my ward and your ward, where they abound, you know, things that we can work together on, Chalmers Road, etc. I think that's an excellent idea as well. And then for other wards, and particularly neighbourhood forums like those out in Broadstone, as Councillor Brooks normally tells us, the fact that they have very limited development, that still means that they have requirements for community infrastructure improvements. So the fact that we have the second scheme that allows them to bid into this strategic pot, I think is an excellent. So I'm very pleased to second it, and I hope everyone else will support it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, absolutely, and concur with that. I'm going to come to Chairman of ONS now, and then I'll come to Councillor Kelly, who's been leading some of this work alongside the portfolio holder. Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. There was a little bit of confusion at the Overview Scrutiny Board on this paper, not least because of the executive summary, which actually kicks it off by saying to seek approval for the governance of BCP Council SIL receipts. The report covers proposed governance for both strategic and neighbourhood portion SIL monies. So immediately it leads you to think that the paper does actually cover the strategic part of the SIL money. So it's a question of words, actually, because once we got into the paper, we realised that was just the wording that made it slightly misleading. And in fact, the paper is deemed to be just looking at the neighbourhood portion of the SIL, and we did understand that, although we were getting a bit confused at the beginning of the debate. But the issues really focused, the substantive issue revolves around Scheme 2, and there are three elements of, I guess, concern. That one was that where neighbourhoods are, particularly where wards are adjoining other wards that do have development, and one side adjacent to that ward doesn't have any development, they would have to go into the SIL, the strategic pot, in order to make a bid. And the concern there was that the amount of money available for that was not defined. Two, that the representation on the panel making decisions about that was not cross-party, and I think that was probably the main items. And I think there was a feeling that some wards may be disadvantaged by not being able to get access to the strategic SIL pot, and in particular that if you're bidding into the strategic SIL pot, you would be competing with major projects which may always take priority over the needs of a particular ward that's not developing any of its own SIL funding. And so that was the substantive argument. There were also some other fairly minor issues raised, which portfolio holder did agree to, but I'll come on to those and just read them out. So the overview, and I have to say that in principle, I think people are generally very supportive of the overall idea of the scheme. It's, so these are just some detail that they were looking to improve upon. But the resolution passed by the board it was resolved that the report be referred back for further consideration on the governance for Scheme 2, including the total amount of funding available and the panel to establish the schemes it will cover. So that was the resolution. But in addition to that, and other points that Councillor Broadhead did agree at the meeting, was that the board also recommended that monies be allocated on a quarterly basis, not twice yearly, and that any balances move forward into the next quarter if not spent. The portfolio holder accepted these recommendations at the ONS board meeting and also gave a commitment to include ward councillors at all stages of the process, in particular with respect to neighbourhood forums, as outlined in paragraph 11 of the report. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bartlett. And I think it goes to show that effectively we've had an all-member seminar on this. We've had an overview and scrutiny on this process, and members are approving the detail of a paper, improving the detail of a paper, which is exactly what we want to see. So thanks for your contribution to that. Before I open up to wider membership, can I bring in our lead member, Jane Kelly, to discuss the paper? Thanks, Jane.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, I'm really excited about this paper. As Councillor Broadhead has outlined the changes that we're making to the way that this is governed and administrated. And I think it's going to be a really good compromise between the two legacy systems. What we have to remember is that these funds are just what they say on the tin. They're levies on developers to improve the infrastructure in a particular area, and it's all about the communities who live there and for improving their living conditions and the kind of infrastructure that they can have in their ward. So it's really down to ward councillors to talk to their residents, to find out what is required in those areas, and to work up really good deliverable plans and bring them to the panel. We're talking about having extra meetings in between the panels so that we can make sure that the plans that are being drawn up are really the best that they can be before we get to the last part of it, and then they run the risk of being denied permission. We don't want that. We want things to really happen in these wards with this money. This is a really good chunk of money. It's a fabulous story, and I'm so glad that so many people have put a lot of work into it to make it so good. I appreciate the comments from the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny. I think the points you've made are really good, and I know that Councillor Broadhead is going to expand on those shortly. Thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thanks for your work in it. So, Phil, we've now heard from Overview and Scrutiny. Would you like to move the recommendations now, or wait for the debate?
Yes, I'll make some recommended changes to the recommendations now, with your permission, Chair, which, as I intimated earlier, hopefully address a lot of the real scrutiny of the detail that's come in. I just echo your points that I think this shows how it should work, an all-member seminar so that we get initial feedback, we work up a scheme, scrutiny hopefully help improve it, and then we listen and respond accordingly. And I'd also like to use this opportunity to really point out that Jane Kelly has done a tremendous amount of work on this. So any of the bad stuff is all down to me, but all the hard work and all the good stuff is very much certainly at her door. So the recommendations that we'd like to make to address the issues is, firstly, under recommendation A3, to replace that recommendation which deals with this frequency issue, which members have talked about, which I completely agree with. Currently, it says that the bidding process is to be held twice yearly in April and October in each municipal year, other than the first bids for the scheme to be invited from May 2021. As Councillor Kelly has pointed out, we're going to have lots of kind of informal rounds in between so that we can help work bids up. But clearly, particularly for smaller bids, waiting 6 months isn't ideal. So my recommendation is to change that wording to the first bidding round for the new schemes will start from May 2021 and then held thereafter as frequently as required to ensure communities are able to access SIL money for their projects in a timely fashion. The set of arrangements to be delegated under C will also include provision for smaller scale bids of up to £2,500 to be processed through fast-track decision arrangements within the provisions of the Council's financial regulations. And again, Chair, that's to respond to the point that if you had some very minor schemes, you wouldn't have to wait to the full 6 months. That will result in the panel probably having to meet more regularly, perhaps via email, for those smaller schemes, but hopefully that covers and all of the issues raised there. The second formal recommendation would be to amend B, which is around the panel, to address that point around making sure that we've got other member involvement as well. So at the moment it just comprises, the initial recommendation was myself as portfolio holder and the lead member for engagement, but to change that to be, for the new B, to read Cabinet establish a member SIL allocations panel to make decisions on SIL neighbourhood portion bids. The SIL allocations panel will comprise 3 councillors, including the portfolio holder for regeneration, economy and strategic planning, the lead member for engagement and 1 other, and the directors of growth and infrastructure and communities. And I'll make the commitment that that wouldn't be a member of the administration as well, so of the party, so that way we can assure that we get other member involvement as well. Those are the 2 formal recommendations. The other point that I had committed to in the meeting under paragraph 11 was just to insert the words including ward councillors, because the current situations are, if there is a neighbourhood plan in place, the neighbourhood portion is essentially delegated to that area, but of course we want to assure ward councillor involvement as well. In my mind, it was always given, but happy to put those words in to make it absolutely plain. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Phil. And just to confirm with Councillor Anderson, he's happy with those recommendations, alterations. And Phil, you've put that forward democratic, so we've got a record of that. Yes. Okay, Councillor Anderson.
Chairman, I'm absolutely happy to accept those changes. I think they will improve the scheme.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. Fine, so we now move on to other members of the council who might wish to speak, and I've got Councillor Andy Hadley raised. Andy.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, it's interesting, isn't it, the language, because both the portfolio holder and the leader of engagement talked about areas, and then that's been transposed to wards. And I do think it's unfortunate that by going for a ward-based arrangement, it is concentrating the development, the monies available to those areas with massive development, and that's very few wards, as a sort of a guaranteed share of the money. So the community groups, and particularly the community portion, that people we give money to, potentially have a much wider remit than that. They will work across a much larger area. And certainly in the pool scheme, we had people who were proposing really good things for very small amounts of money that were very worthwhile to support. That were supporting people across all wards, and many members of the public couldn't even tell you where the ward begins or ends, or even what a ward is. I've had queries to that effect. I don't live in a ward, people say. So I'm a bit sorry about that. I think it's good that we've got a commitment to include a member of the opposition on the panel, because I do think there is a danger otherwise that it's seen a bit as a political patronage, and I think that's really unfortunate. And that's not what the SIL's about. It's people who are moving into the area and the people who are impacted by that who need to see the benefit out of the SIL scheme. So I welcome the change that you've made there. There's a specific about the Pool Quays area, because as part of the redevelopment zone, that became zero SIL. So being in a neighbourhood forum area, they would get the SIL, but the SIL has been rated at 0. Now that was done to try and kickstart the regeneration in that area. It hasn't achieved that, and we found other ways to do that. We've got the Environment Agency paying for a raised seawall, and obviously the council ourselves trying to unlock the development on the power station site. So I would ask that we, if we can, to review that zero SIL, because I think it's actually quite damaging in terms of the impact of that very major development in the heart of Poole on the area around it. It doesn't give the residents an opportunity. So my plea, I suppose, is what we can do about that in particular. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Appreciate that. I'm sure the portfolio holder will come back later on in the debate. Does anybody? So now I move forward. With no other hands showing, I move forward to the wider cabinet to have a discussion. Would anybody like to comment on this item? Councillor Anger, Mohan.
Thank you, Chairman. In support of the paper and the amendments that the portfolio holders has accepted there. It's only an observation actually about the scheme. I absolutely welcome the idea of actually having rounds of SIL almost on demand, within reason, of course. I think what also needs to come into this, and this is not any change to the paper, but just literally the way it's done, is that there still needs to be a sort of like an overview or a bit of a far-sightedness about the way it's done. Because one thing I could see that could happen with sort of literally a batch to batch to batch way of doing it is that it could be subject to the vagaries categories of literally who managed to get their bid in by the deadline, rather than actually which are the most worthy ones, you know, and a very good one actually just missing the deadline and so on. So I think that the task is still quite a difficult one, which is doing it with the frequency which Philip, you've said, which is great, but also I think also having a longer view about the things likely to be coming through the pipeline, and making sure there's a sort of a judicious sorting of things into the batches, so that frankly we end up at the end of 2 years or 3 years with a sort of a broad support across all the councillor group for the projects that actually did get funded, and those which, you know, frankly didn't quite make the mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohan. Great. So yeah, no, I'm not seeing another hand, so I'll just like to comment on this effectively. Councillor Hadley alluded to it in terms of the pool scheme, but effectively I think where we've gotten to now is the best of both worlds. We've been able to take some of the really strong parts out of both schemes, and I think that's, you know, a really improved policy effectively. You know, this does give allocation to wards when there isn't, you know, a significant amount of development, but it also enables the wards where there is material development to be able to you know, work with and mitigate that. So I think there is that balance there, which I fully approve of. And you know, and I also appreciate the amendment around extending the panel to three people and one not being a member of the administration, because this is absolutely testament to how we're trying to, you know, work as an administration. All member involvement, cross-party involvement, both at all member seminar, overview and scrutiny, and now also going to be having that not just administration members on the panel. So yeah, I think it's come to a really great place. I'd commend Jane and Phil very much for the work that's been done on it so far. I'm not seeing any other members of Cabinet wish to speak, so can I go? Oh, I've got May Haynes to come in, and then I'll go back to the portfolio holder. May.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just wanted to comment. I really welcome this paper, because obviously as a ward councillor in an area where a substantial amount of SIL is generated, I've already received inquiries about when the next bidding round is. So to hear the portfolio holder say that actually because of the time it's taken to get here, that the next round will be in May is most welcome. But I also want to touch on a point that was raised about the panel that will actually be sifting through and assessing the applications. I think that because we've now moved to a more ward-based criteria, there is that safeguard, if I can use that word loosely, that it wouldn't be based on grace and favour or patronage, as has been mentioned, because it is money that's been generated within a ward. But for the ones where there is less SIL generated and they bid onto scheme 2, again, there is safeguards there, because it has to meet a certain criteria. And if it doesn't, then it is unlikely to actually go forward. So I think I just wanted to give the assurance that whichever scheme a bid goes into, there are safeguards in place that would ensure that actually it would be treated fairly. And I have confidence in both the portfolio holder and the lead member that they would actually follow those criteria, and that there would be no issue with there being grace and favour or patronage at all. I am confident that it would work and it would work well. Thank you, Chair.
Absolutely, and well said. Fantastic. Okay, so I'll now move back to the portfolio holder, Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you to colleagues for all of your involvement in this and all of your comments. Councillor Hadley raises some interesting points about the future of SIL schemes going forward, and of course that's something I'm sure that we'll all be looking at. Equally, as I didn't mention in the opening as well, there is still some further work to be done regarding that strategic pot. I think it's worth it, pointing out here, we're talking about the 15% of the neighbourhood portions. There is still the 85% of that strategic pot, which is the big money to be spent on the much more kind of BCP-wide infrastructure with regards to the impact of developments as well. And that's where the real important big stuff is being done. And I think we've still got some work to do around making sure that we've got strategic oversight of that as well, which hasn't happened in the past. But as Councillor Iyengar and Councillor Haynes have just pointed out, we've got to have eyes on this. And the whole point of this panel is that, as May just pointed out, it's quite straightforward in the areas where the development is happening, because there's already a certain amount there. would point out, as Councillor Kelly pointed out as well, this is about the community. This is the schemes that can and should be led by the community as well. And it's a great way to get that community involvement within their areas. But yes, the whole point of the panel is to have that strategic oversight of the bigger picture as well, and that's why we put it in this format. Last point I would make was regard to Councillor Handy's comment, which we've heard before, about the perceived unfairness for areas that are attracting much higher levels of SIL than others. But I think we need to be really honest about this. Those areas that are attracting much higher levels of SIL are attracting it because there's been a heck of a lot of development in the area. That means that they have a heck of a lot more problems, and therefore 15% of a big number is a bigger number. But of course, the need is so much greater. So while we may look like some big figures in some areas, that's because they've seen a tremendous amount of change, and therefore it's only fair, and this is where the thrust of the government's stance on this, that they do get the right to spend that and mitigate that in the area. But delighted with the debate today, delighted that if we push the button on this now, £1 million of funds is released for community projects, and thank you all for your support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Broughton. Okay, great. So let's go to the vote now. So we've got the amended recommendations in front of us. So thank you very much for those. Do I have anybody that would like to speak against the recommendations? Please show now. Not seeing it, so I look forward to move that as a unanimous decision. So thank you for the work in it, and thank you also to overview and scrutiny on it as well. Brilliant. Okay, so let's move on to agenda item 7, which is the future regeneration in BCP. Councillor Broadhead, you again.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, me again. Again, we had a really good discussion on this at the most recent Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting, where, without wishing to over-exaggerate, I think we had a very broad level of support for this. Because what this is trying to address, this is not a paper about individual sites throughout the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area. This is a paper which looks at the reality that we've made a political commitment to turbocharging regeneration across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. We've backed that up with a financial commitment of a 500% increase in resource to make that happen. And now we've got a real choice about how we use that investment to get the most bang for the buck. And broadly speaking, we have two choices. We take that additional investment and we do things as they're quite often done in local authorities, plough it into the organisation, probably in a very siloed approach, or whether we think different, which a lot of local authorities are doing around the country, and very much more commercial, in that if you really want to make sure that you actually deliver on regeneration, you bake delivery into the mechanism from the core, and that seems a very sensible approach. Councils in the past have been have a lot of criticism, quite rightly, including predecessor authorities, of being able to draw pretty plans on a page, but when it comes to it, kind of worry about delivery afterwards. That's the wrong way to do it. That's not the way it's done in the commercial sector. So this is really the beginning of the journey to make sure that we actually put deliverability at the heart of our regeneration prospects going forward. The paper goes across a number of areas. There's a little bit of analysis of the current mechanisms that we've got underway. At the moment, we've got work underway with local partnerships to look at the current joint venture we've got through the Bournemouth Development Company, which has had its successes. It's come to its 10-year anniversary now as well, so it's the right point to look at how that works for the future. Equally, we've got a number of mechanisms already set up, such as the Seascape Homes and Property Limited, which largely focus on things like mitigating the impact of homelessness, and has undertaken a very wide-scale acquisition project and been very successful in that area. But I think it's pretty clear that we need to go further. If we want to unleash the scale and ambition that we put forward in our big plan, particularly around pool regeneration, where we've got the most opportunity, it would seem a little bit of a waste of money to take that 500% increase and just plough it into the council. We need an experienced team of the right skills and the right experience to try and take this forward. That's why one of the things that this will be exploring is the council setting up a wholly owned urban regeneration company, precisely to direct that resource and rather have council officers leading on some multi-million-pound projects to get the right experience from the private sector, albeit fully owned by the council, to drive that forward at scale and pace. Again, we had a long discussion on this at Overview and Scrutiny, but this paper is really about setting the scene and also giving authorisation for the Chief Executive in consultation with the leader and myself to procure and review advice from external consultants, which have already been appointed and are already doing that work at pace, to bring reports back to the future to Cabinet and Council as appropriate and if needed for any further mechanisms that we might wish to do further, but really to get on with the task at hand. I will, and I'm sure the leader will, in seconding, to make the commitment. We don't want to hang around on this. A tremendous amount of very, very good work has been done on that visioning exercise for some of these really critical sites that we've done. Now's the time to stop navel gazing, start delivering. We can only do that if we do it properly, and that's what this paper is set up to achieve. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, here, well said, and fully endorse that. I'll formally second the paper, but what I'll do is we've got a number of regeneration lead members, so I'll reserve the right to speak until we've heard from some of those. Before we get to that, I need to ask the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny. I believe Councillor Broadhead has said you looked at the paper in detail. I don't believe there are any recommendations. Steve, is there anything you would like to bring to us? Thank you.
No, we had no recommendations other than generally we're very supportive of the initiative. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So what I'll do, I'll bring our lead members now, and I've got one showing. Councillor Barron, Steve.
Thank you, Leader. I welcome this paper. We need new housing, and this will streamline the process of actually getting holes dug and cranes in the sky. With schemes of this size, it makes perfect sense to tap into the wealth of experience and skills outside of the council. Thank you, Leader. Brilliant.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. It's appreciated. Councillor Brooks, Nigel.
Yes, thank you, Leader. As the Cabinet Plus member for regeneration in Christchurch and also a board representative with Bournemouth Development Company and working closely with Councillor Phil Broadhead, it is quite clear that there is an immense task to actually implement regeneration, and Appendix A and Appendix B make quite clear the scale of the challenge that actually faces BCP. The delivery mechanism is the most critical part to actually get the right path to bring forward developments, and I think this report makes it quite clear that that actually has to be set out in a way that's achievable and realistic, and I think it actually gives the pathway to enable these developments to be brought forward, and I fully support the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. That's appreciated. Okay, so let me open up to the wider council membership now to see if anybody would like to raise to speak on this paper. I've got Councillor Hilliard. Paul.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, whilst generally I'm supportive of
I believe I've lost you, Paul. I presume that's
I've
okay.
lost you as well, Chairman.
Getting nods. So, Paul, what we might do until you come back in, I might. Yeah, I can. Do you want to try again, Paul? It was you just froze briefly. Do you want, if you try again now, I think that might well work. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's a recommendation 1. So I support the initiative to regenerate, but it's where it says recommend to Cabinet. Now, when the Deputy Leader was speaking, he said recommend to Cabinet and Council. The recommendation just says Cabinet. So as you can imagine, these are big schemes which all members need to be involved with. So I would like to see that the actual process involves some member seminar engagement before commitment, and similarly, yeah, it shouldn't be recommends to Cabinet. It should be and then on to Council. Thank you.
Yeah, so portfolio will come back, but just in terms of just to provide some clarity at this point, Paul, this is about the delivery mechanisms. This is about that ability in terms of the structural points. Anything that the financial regs of the council will have to go to. So if we're going to do something material on a scheme that's over the financial reg, it would have to go through the normal process. So this is by no means anything that will impact on individual sites being outside of the full council process. And in fact, I think you can see, hopefully, and I'm sure you'll agree, Paul, the significant uplift in all member seminars we've done. We're actually quite the opposite. We want to be taking the whole membership group with us as we try and develop our sites rather than just discussing internally. And Phil's right, it's now time to stop that navel gazing, it's to move on and do stuff. We're going to do that with the full membership. Okay, fantastic. So don't see any other members wishing to speak on that. So then I'll bring in the wider cabinet. Great, Bob Lawton.
Thank you, Leader. I'm totally supportive of this paper. Fantastic paper. Well done, Phil and the Leader. It's a great paper. It takes us to, as Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council, to the next level. It's an excellent scheme working under the banner of the Seascape scheme, which I set up under the old Bournemouth Council. So it's a brilliant paper. I think it's an absolute game changer for the whole of the area and will take us forward. And I'm really pleased to endorse it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. That's really appreciated. Do we have any other members of Cabinet that wish to speak? Okay, before handing back to the portfolio holder, can I just say, I fully agree with Councillor Lawton. This is a game changer. It's been said before, but it's now about baking in that delivery, and that's what we have to do. If we're going to do this with the pace and scale that our communities are demanding, the wider economic imperative of getting on and doing this as we come out of this crisis. And also to tie in with that bold big plan that we put together, we've got massive aspiration for the quality of our area, and this should enable us to unlock that. So again, I join others in commending the work you've put into this paper, Phil. Thank you very much for it, and go back to you to sum up.
Yes, no, thank you, Drew, and a very much a joint effort. And just to respond to Councillor Hilliard's point, you've made it very clear. There are two things that I was referring to. First of all, as you pointed out, this isn't about all of the schemes. This is just about that mechanism delivery, and that's why this particular bit is recommended to Cabinet. In item 2, it does note that any future things that are of any consequence whatsoever will be brought to future and Cabinet and Council meetings as appropriate and as set out in the proposals. Because as you've said, we've got some really big decisions looming ahead of us and some absolutely massive opportunities. £1 billion of GDV of council-owned sites alone. We can and should be going further. It's quite clear that within this structure, if we set it up right, that could actually have some real impact on non-council sites as well. And we're already in some advanced discussions with some of the adjacent landowners for some of the council schemes to make sure that we do things in a really joined up way. And of course, we've got the Futures Fund of £50 million to be able to try and take that forward as well. So doing this right, we should be able to deliver on the aspirations of the big plan and to do it extremely quickly. And a few members did raise that point in the Overview and Scrutiny Board meeting about making sure that we're very joined up on all of this. It's exactly what we're trying to do here. And actually, I think that's part of the problem we have at the moment. We've got a lot of different projects. They're often led by different parts of the council, not how you do things in the commercial sector. So let's get the right team, the right skills and experience coupled with this investment and unleash all of the possibilities that we've got ahead of us. It's a very exciting time. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that. And look forward to working with all of the lead members on regeneration as we really start to get some of the pace going on these sites as well. So great opportunity. Okay, let me move it to the vote now. Do I have any councillors wishing to speak in any dissent of that recommendation? I'm not seeing that, so I'll move that forward as a unanimous approval. So thank you very much, and we'll look to move on to the next item, which is agenda item 8, L2P Capital Programme for 21-22, and I'll come to Councillor Mike Green. Mike.
Thank you very much, Leader. The local transport plan is been set out. It runs from 2011 to 2026 in the current version, and its objectives include maintaining the existing network efficiently, strategic infrastructure improvements, travel safety measures, car parking measures, and increasingly important at the moment, the objectives include reducing the need to travel, public transport alternatives to the car, and active travel and greener travel choices. So each year we have a paper coming forward to work out how the capital expenditure is going to be split, and the money that is going to be split, it comes from the Department for Transport, from central government. It also includes our own local authority contributions and additional external funding, which comes primarily from the Dorset Local Enterprise Partnership, but from others in smaller cases as well. What I would ask people to do, please, is to look at the supplementary papers, because since publication of the agenda item, the government has now announced our allocation for 21-22, which was not available at that time. And I'm very pleased to say that they have endorsed our current approach and increased our spending from 6.8 million, or increased our funding from 6.8 million to 7.9 million for the current year. So as you'll see from particularly Appendix A, and again I would suggest looking at the supplementary papers in doing so, the allocations and this purpose of this paper is not to be scheme specific, except in the case of a few individual items which are externally funded, which need to be appointed in that way. But it takes the whole amount of funding and it divides it into the integrated transport block and the highways maintenance block, and then within each of those two blocks, that is subdivided into a few subsections. I would just like to draw members' attention to a couple of items within the integrated transport block schemes, where we can see particularly the transport safety travel safety measures, that I'm very pleased to say that we've seen a 50% increase this year in the amount that we are allocating to spend on travel safety measures, from 545,000 to 811,000. So that 545 was last year. And you'll also see in there that there is the TCF money comes in, the transforming travel money of £41 million that comes in. And in addition, I'd just like to draw attention within the active travel and greener travel choices to the establishment of a £50,000 contribution to the business travel network, in that we recognise very clearly that it's not just the council that is responsible for moving us to a greener future as far as travel is concerned, travel and transport is concerned, but it is the responsibility of us to act as leaders for the whole community, including the business community. I'm also pleased to say that we're presenting a 25% increase compared with the previous year on public transport alternatives to the car. And again, you can see that within that paper. So I think, Leader, what it is showing once again is this administration's absolute commitment to sustainable transport, by improving the amount of money that has been spent compared with previous years. And I'm very happy to be presenting this paper. I understand that Councillor Anderson will second the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Mike. It was really, really helpful. And yes, I've got Mark is showing. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not quite sure if I can add anything more to that. I think Councillor Green has explained it very eloquently and very fully, and I'm more than happy to second the paper.
Thank you very much. Really appreciated. So that's proposed and seconded, which leads me to move to the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, Councillor Bartlett. Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yes, as you say, we didn't discuss this at the board, but thank you, Councillor Green, for sending me some homework a couple of nights ago. And so I had a quick look. Of course, what really springs out at this is this huge amount of money being spent on TCF, sustainable travel, active travel, etc., greener travel. And, you know, it is an enormous amount of money. And I think, you know, the figure sort of slips past the public notice when it's included in a very detailed report in the way that it is. But, you know, the overriding theme is the massive investment in that kind of sustainable travel. Thank you.
Absolutely. And a point well made. made. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's move to the wider council membership now, and I've got Councillor Hadley his hand is up. So Andy.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, obviously Transform Travel was a bid that we won, and really pleased to see that moving forward, and the work that Mike is doing on that. It's a shame really that I know we had to show a 3-year programme for the maintenance, but we don't show a forward plan for what we know in terms of the capital spend, because obviously there's a similar amount of money from TCF in the next year, but also the local transport plan and how we might plan to do things over the next couple of years. Would be really useful, and actually not to have 3 years spent on 3 separate pages would have also been quite nice. But on Townside, I'm slightly surprised that there's still forward spend on that, because Townside is pretty much complete apart from a bit of work on the artwork there. I was wondering whether they're coming back to correct the pavements, because some of them are pretty awful. But for walking and cycling, I've had quite a few complaints already. On the town centre walking, there's a significant amount of money, and again, I'm afraid Poole High Street is a real trip hazard, and I'd be really keen to know that that's going to get resolved. It was in our High Street bid, which didn't get through, so it's something that we need to find another way to fund, and I'd be really pleased if we can find a way to do that through LTP or otherwise. I was slightly surprised under the maintenance that there's nothing in potholes for future years. So pothole maintenance obviously is an enduring problem that however many we fill, there's always more that open up. But that's not showing in maintenance, so that was seemed to be a bit of a gap. And then the other one is UTMC, which is Urban Traffic Management Control. I just wondered how that ties into the Smart Cities work, and whether we're going to see some savings from the Smart Cities work, which obviously produces the opportunity for much cheaper sensors to be added to the network. So whether you end up with a lot more sensors at the same cost, but I'd just like to know if they're tied together, because they seem to be in different parts of the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. I'm not seeing any other wider members raised. So, Mike, can I come back to you before we go on to the cabinet discussion? Mike.
Yeah, thank you. If I could just respond to a couple of the items on this one. I'm hoping that Mr. Forrester is with us. Will be able, if he is, maybe he could indicate. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So he'll be able to fill in the gaps on Townside and hopefully on UTMC as well for Councillor Hadley. I think it is important to mention that we are, as I said earlier, that this isn't looking at specific schemes. So that would be the reason why we hadn't identified any particular high street and within the town centres. And as Councillor Hadley will know, we are also looking at alternative approaches on Poole High Street and seeing what funds might be available to help revive that area, which I would expect would be likely to include footway and carriageway treatment, particularly footway treatment within that. As far as the full 3 years is concerned, obviously we have got they are rough estimates for what will happen in 22, 23 and 23, 24. And the reason for that is that, as we predicted, rather than providing a 3-year settlement, at the moment the government has only provided a 1-year settlement. The pothole element, in previous years, the challenge fund money was not included within the LTP, and I think we can just try to see on the graph where we can see that specifically. But I think the reason on that, when you can see here, there is a neighbourhood services for 21-22 pothole investment of £500,000. We would expect and hope that when the settlement comes through next year from government, that there would again be pothole and challenge fund money that would come in, and we would be able to repair them. I think we can safely say that this administration is not going to allow the potholes to get worse. Thank you, Liam.
Absolutely well said. So just to confirm, Councillor Green, would you like Mr. Forrester to come in and do it? If you think that'd be useful for Cabinet to hear that, great.
If Mr. Forrester could come in to answer the points on UTMC and on Townside, that would be very helpful.
Great, fantastic. So, Mr. Forrester, thank you for attending, and please can you address the Cabinet and Councillor Hadley? Thank you.
Yeah, not problem. Can I start with the Pothole Fund first? Just to kind of clarify, there is a there is an allocation, as Councillor Green has identified, to our neighbourhood services colleagues. This year, the DFT have included pothole allocation within our wider highway maintenance allocation, whereas in previous years it's been very ad hoc and generally delivered later on in the financial year. So it's pleasing to see that we've got it up front so that we can do proper planning and delivery. We also have pothole funding as part of the kind of pre-patching and planning section, and also the surface treatment. So there's 3 categories there with a combined total of nearly 1.5 million that have pothole elements included in them, and that we'll be delivering pothole repairs and replacements as a result of. Regarding the UTMC, there has recently been a review of the quality of signals, and as a legacy kind of authority, there is significant defects within our stock of signals, and so the UTMC allocation in the maintenance side of it is to bring those signals up to a quality that is acceptable, essentially so that they don't fall over and so that they don't disrupt the network massively. So this is a maintenance element, and it's predominantly kind of fixing those that are end of life. Regarding Townside, yeah, we are very close to the end. The DLET funding that we receive is finishing at the end of this month. There are a few items that will progress into next financial year that we need to cover off, hence the small allocation as a total combinations. This forms our local contribution to the Townside scheme that we've committed to. So essentially it's to finish those elements off, a little bit of resurfacing and other kind of minor fixes that will remain after the funding deadline of March, the end of March, for the DLET funding. I don't know if there's any others. Have I covered everything off there?
I think from my list you have done, and I'm getting a nod from Councillor Green and Councillor Hadley. So I think that's really useful, Tim. Thanks for being so thorough.
No problem.
Great. Okay, so I'll now I'll move it on to the wider cabinet. I'll start actually. And I just want to commend how exciting I think effectively the whole agenda is around travel at the moment. We've had it put out to us by Councillor Bartlett right at the beginning of the debate, and we've used the word game changer before, talking about regeneration, but there's a game changer in terms of travel and the government commitment to this agenda, both in terms of transforming travel, but also how great is it that we've got 1.1 million extra money coming in on this paper from the initial settlement. It's great to see this administration trusted effectively, and our bids actually going up rather than down, which we unfortunately saw at the start of the previous administration. So really exciting. I think it's great, and I'll just also throwing a bit of a pitch as well for the Futures Fund, because that is there to do infrastructure and public realm improvement. So in terms of some of the pieces that Councillor Hadley raised quite rightly, we've actually now got more opportunity to affect those than ever before. So the ambition is there to massively improve our travel and our infrastructure as well. Fantastic. Okay, do we have any other members of Cabinet that wish to speak on this item? I'm not seeing anybody raised, so let's take that to the vote. Please, if anybody wishes to speak against the recommendation as put, please raise now, which I'm not seeing. So Mike, thank you very much for that paper, and also Tim Forrester. And we move forward with a unanimous recommendation, unanimous decision. So thank you. Okay, that moves us to the next agenda item, which is the Children and Young People's Partnership Plan 21-24, agenda item 9. And I've got Councillor Mike White. Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'm really pleased to introduce this item. This is a plan which was produced by the Children's Services Partnership Board, which is chaired by Anthony Douglas, who's our independent DFE advisor. The board includes partners from education, police and health, among others, and of course ourselves are there as partners. Now, the plan you've got before, it really is an ambitious plan for our children. It includes a broad range of support for schools, for activity on mental health, for apprenticeships, and a range of activities to support families. So a really big thank you to Anthony and his partnership board for all their support and hard work. Now, this plan has been through ONS, who were generally very positive about it. You may note the Cabinet papers include 2 supplementary papers as part of the package. One of these covers the draft minutes from ONS, and the other one summarises some changes which have been made to the covering report. If I can just highlight the main changes, they include a more detailed timescale for development of the final plan. It includes a more detailed equalities assessment, and in particular, it does include a change to the main recommendation, which I'll come to now. The change to the main recommendation recognises the fact that this is not actually our report. It is a partnership plan. The original recommendation, which was going through the process, asked Cabinet and Council to adopt the plan. It may be slightly a matter of semantics, but it's arguably not appropriate that we adopt a plan which is not actually our plan. So the recommendation to Council now reads that Cabinet recommends that Council fully supports this plan. So I'd like to propose that Cabinet go along with that revised recommendation. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mike, and I understand the reason for that recommendation. Thank you. And I'll move to Councillor Nicola Green, who I believe is seconding.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you to Councillor White for presenting this plan. One of the first and most frequent comments I've heard about it is how readable it is, and I do really enthusiastically endorse that. It's terribly helpful to have a plan which is accessible, readable, and understandable, and that's actually come about because it's been a co-production with young people and the partnership that Councillor White has spoken to. I'd perhaps just like to mention that it is one of course the crucial partnership is that which we have with our schools, and they are that universal provision where almost all of our children are seen on almost a daily basis. And I couldn't let this opportunity pass without paying tribute to the schools and the part that they have played. They have, of course, remained open throughout successive lockdown for our vulnerable children, and indeed for those the children whose parents or carers we all needed to be out there providing the services on which we've relied over the past few months. But a particular thanks, if I may, to parents who've done an extraordinary job of supporting their children at home. They've become experts in all manner of subjects, some of which they might have been quite reluctant to remember. I've heard tales of work on phonics through to A-level maths. Well done, parents, and thank you so much for providing that additional support. While many of them have indeed been juggling their own jobs and working from home and all its many challenges. So, of course, this week I'm delighted that most of our children are back at school now, and wish them all very well in getting settled back in, and looking forward to the rest of the academic year. Council, of course, a couple of weeks ago voted to invest a further, an additional £1 million in a fund to help them catch up through the Family Investment Fund, and we really wish that this would be applied to its best benefit. I'm quite confident about that. There is, of course, much work to be done, and a lot of that is set out in pages 27 and 28. And I did just particularly want to draw Cabinet's attention to the appreciative inquiry, which will be going on to achieve a better level of inclusion, which of course is very high on our agenda. So much in there. I'm sure we could talk about. Well, in fact, Mike and I have talked at great lengths in other forums about this. But I'm so pleased that it's now in front of Cabinet, and that it will get the recognition it deserves as it goes through to Council in due course. So very happy to second the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. So the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny to raise if he would like to comment on this. I don't think it went through, but it wouldn't, would it? Because it would be the Children's Overview and Scrutiny Group.
Children's ONS.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Mike. So then we move to whether any of the wider membership would like to speak on this paper. I'm not seeing any raised, so then we go to the Cabinet. So would any members of Cabinet like to comment on this paper? Not seeing any raised. I think we had excellent introductions from both Councillor White and Councillor Green, so really appreciate that. Mike, is there anything you would like to say in summing up?
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to say is to echo what Nicola has said about the clarity of this report. It is beautiful English, and if you haven't read it, please do. I commend all those involved, which includes Anthony, Elaine, and a number of our officers for the sheer clarity of this document. Thank you, and I commend the report to Council with to Cabinet with the recommendation that we recommend that Council fully supports this plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike, and that's clear. Great. So we'll move to the vote now. I don't see any members wishing to raise to discuss against that, so I look forward to moving that forward as a unanimous proposal. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. And we'll move on. So next item on the agenda is agenda item 10, which is the BCP Council Suicide Prevention Plan, and I'll move to Councillor Green Nicola.
Thank you, Leader. This is clearly a very sombre report to present. It sits in the context of the National Suicide Prevention Strategy. As with most aspects of safeguarding, it's worth repeating that this is everyone's business. It's not a public health issue, it's not a social care issue, it's not a mental health issue, and it's definitely not somebody else's responsibility. And colleagues, we all have that responsibility to make ourselves aware of this strategy and accept its recommendations. Sadly, across Dorset, around 70 to 80 lives are lost to suicide each year, 3/4 of whom are not known to mental health services. The impact upon families, friends and colleagues is devastating, coming as it often does after a prolonged period of anguish and suffering for the victim. The plan in front of us today is BCP Council's own response to the Pan Dorset strategy, which was in itself a piece of work with contributions from a wide range of agencies whose services touch on both victims and the bereaved. Their shared vision is that no one living in Dorset will reach the point where they feel or believe that they have no other choice but to attempt suicide or to end their life by suicide. Our BCP strategy applies to 6 key work streams covering the wide reach of BCP Council services. The hope is that suicide prevention becomes a golden thread running through the work streams. There was agreement across the services that mental health and well-being is even more important due to the impact of the pandemic, which is yet to be fully quantified. The plan is broadly in 2 parts, with external actions mainly focusing on supporting vulnerable groups into which BCP Council services reach, raising awareness, communication and engagement with communities. Alongside this, the internal actions are focused on raising awareness, knowledge and skills around spotting the signs and suicide prevention. This includes planning services to take appropriate and necessary measures to prevent means of suicide, and this was something that the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Panel looked at in quite some detail. There are also several objectives relating to the provision of better support for people affected by suicide. I would advise all members to read the accompanying strategy and the Equalities Impact Assessment, which sets out very clearly both the national context and the local prevalence amongst particular groups. The implementation plan sets out the governance and overall vision, and it's important to note that the 6 work streams with their associate leads have been agreed and are as follows. To develop a focused local media and communication campaign, and this will be led by the academics at Bournemouth University and by Public Health Dorset. To improve access to wider community mental wellbeing and suicide prevention skills and training, including from general practice and primary care awareness, with skills training led again by Public Health Dorset. A community partnership group which will support and advise those themes, and that'll be led by Dorset Mind. Suicide prevention champions and lived experience peer specialists will be led again by the Dorset Mental Health Forum. And Dorset CCG will lead on improving the support available to those who've been bereaved. And something which is, it's not unique to Dorset, but it's something in which Dorset is leading, is about improving the data and intelligence in real time. Historically, we've always had to rely on data, which has been several years in the making, and therefore hasn't necessarily given us an update on the real and current issues faced by our population. I would like to thank Sophia Callaghan and Joe O'Connell, who've led this work stream within the council, and the Health and Adult Social Care for their real constructive engagement and the improvements that they've made to the strategy. Councillor Mark Howell is the council's wellbeing champion, and he has recently sent out a very focused update to members, which I found tremendously helpful, and that's got wellbeing advice. It's been very, very timely. And indeed, I'd like to thank all those who've helped in the development of this strategy, and most especially, and from a personal perspective, those who very bravely and honestly shared their lived experience with me, and that's helped to inform my understanding of the subject. I seek members' support, not just in accepting the report, but in embracing it, understanding and acting upon it, and sharing the vision that no one living in Dorset will reach the point where they feel and believe that they have no other choice but to attempt suicide or to end their life by suicide. Thank you, Leader, and I would like to ask Councillor Mohan Iyengar for his support in seconding the paper.
Thank you very much for that, and Nicola, thank you. So I'll move to Councillor Iyengar. Mohan.
Thank you, Chair. This is a most important paper. I agree with all of the comments in Councillor Green's introduction. I'm very, very pleased to support the plan and this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well introduced. Okay, so then we move on to the overview and scrutiny. Do we have any? Does Councillor Bartlett want to speak to this paper? Steve?
No, Leader, this didn't go through the overview and scrutiny board, but from a personal perspective, I really support and welcome this paper. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for adding that, Steve. Great, so we go to the wider membership now, and I've got Councillor Andy Hadley raised. Andy.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, just ever so quickly, I mean, this is a really important topic. It's a really sensitive topic, and one where the council's work is largely unseen, public, but it's really important. I got involved because there was a particular transport issue, but the language and how we report things and how we deal with them is just so important in terms of trying to preserve life and those people who are at the bottom. So really support this. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can completely concur with that. And I think one of the things I took out from the initial introduction was how this is, a cross-council and a cross-stakeholder piece of work as well. So it's a responsibility for all of us, and will continue to be. Okay, thank you. Right, do we have any of the wider cabinet rest of the cabinet wish to speak on this paper? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody raised, so Councillor Green, I come to you to sum up.
Thank you, Chairman. Nothing to add, just that a reminder that it was considered. There have been 2 member briefings which have been held along with some academic and experts in the field, as well as the public discussion at the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Board. So it has had wide member engagement.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I've got the recommendations as put. Would anybody like to speak against those? If not, we will move forward with a unanimous support of the paper. And I'm not seeing anybody raised, so happy to take that forward unanimously. Thank you very much, Nicola, and also Mohan for seconding the paper. And we now move forward to agenda item 11, which is a sale of Christchurch Bypass car park. Which I'm presenting. I just need to remind Cabinet there is a detail in Appendix 2 of the report is confidential. So if anybody would like to discuss that detail, then please let me know and we can move into exempt session. So this is an interesting paper. It's an opportunity. It's very much not this administration's objective to sell assets. We've made public commitments. We want to build our asset base to work for us for this generation and also the next one. So there has to be a really compelling reason as to why we would look at a disposal. What this does is we believe it enables Waitrose to stay in Christchurch for the foreseeable future and a number of years to come. It's a very key part of the high street in Christchurch. So the opportunity to maintain Waitrose now is really fundamental to us. The detail behind that is effectively there's an aspiration to sign a new lease on the site that they would want to be able to have control of a car park and offer free parking to their customers. What's really important to this administration is we can't lose car parking spaces. So in there is a clause to if there's ever an opportunity for the acquirer to not you want to have this as a car park, there's a clause enabling us to buy it back. And there's also a separate covenant to keep this as a car park effectively. So there's a number of benefits. We're going to keep Waitrose in Christchurch. We're going to deliver free car parking for Christchurch residents in terms of accessing the Waitrose store. No loss of parking provision, and we're very much not interested in selling assets as a general point. But we believe there's a compelling argument in this. In this circumstance, there are some detailed points. You'll notice the recommendation says we take to council and then to leave it to effectively delegated to the portfolio holder to minor negotiated amendments. And we're still in that process as well, but very happy to propose this with the, we've heard from Councillor Bartlett around giving the opportunity for overview and scrutiny to have a look at this paper, and my commitment to working with Councillor Bartlett to make sure there's an opportunity to do that in whatever form we need to. Okay, so I've proposed that, and I'll move to Councillor Broadhead to second it.
Thank you very much, Chair. Happy to second and just underline some of the points that you've raised, because I think it's really important that we talk about what this is and clearly what this isn't as well. Whenever you talk about car parks, it's always a very, very emotive issue, isn't it? Not least because there's a lot of narrative regarding previous administrations selling off car parks, developing car parks, losing spaces, despite the fact that in Bournemouth alone, where that's often centred, every time a car park was developed, replacement parking was secured so that there was no loss of public parking. But even with that kind of correction aside, it's always something that people get very, very concerned about, and quite rightly. And that's why we entered this into this with some trepidation, although it was a hangover decision from the previous administration. And really what this is around is about securing Waitrose's future. But we've got, if we're going to do that, and as you said, it's a really important part of the high street, we've got to make sure that we've got all the bases covered. So number one, are we in danger of losing this car park if they decide to arbitrarily develop it? No, we put a clause in there that if at any point this wants to be changed from a car park, then we can reacquire it. So it assures that car park from the future. And as you said, that's written into the covenants as well. Number two, is this a loss of any parking in and of itself? Well, no. The reason that Waitrose want to do this is because they already offer a refund scheme, and as they're looking at their business model going forward, it makes sense for them to have a much more streamlined way of doing it rather than otherwise. Number three, is this a situation whereby it's only going to be used for Waitrose? They're going to put prices up for anybody else? No, because again, in the confidential papers, we've got assurances about the pricing mechanism as well. So really, the worry about losing spaces is not there, because this will remain a car park. The worry about loss of parking spaces is not there either, because again, it will remain public access. And you know, as we've talked about, you know, this is about securing the future of the high street for Christchurch and beyond as well. So it's not something we want to do. We don't want to sell assets, but faced with that decision, I think we've covered all the bases, no loss of parking, and set it for the future to make sure that it can't just suddenly become a block of flats. That cannot happen with the agreement that we've got, and we protected Waitrose, and hopefully residents of Christchurch and those nearby, myself included, are quite happy with that arrangement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Broadhead. Thank you. Okay, so with that proposed and seconded, I'll move to Councillor Bartlett, Chair of Overview and Scrutiny. Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yes, notwithstanding the discussion we had earlier on, you know, on reflection, thinking about this, of course, your consideration now will be carried out without the benefit of an in-depth analysis and scrutiny of the Overview and Scrutiny Board. So I'm a little, you know, I'm just a little cautious that you will be going ahead based on this paper without that benefit of consideration. That's the only point I would have made. Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, and thanks, Stephen. I think it's a really valid point, and I think that's why it's worth us just reflecting on the fact that the ultimate decision is for council. So if between the discussion here and the decision at council, we have an opportunity to work out how we're going to get overview and scrutiny engaged fully in this process as well. So I'm really happy that the debate's going to happen here. Any further recommendations from overview and scrutiny can come to a later cabinet, as long as we move what full council the paper goes to. And obviously, just to sort of iterate, it wasn't this administration's choice to move the scheduled meeting in April of full council forward. That was done with at the request of the chairman of the council. So, but we will come up with a solution on that, Steve. And thank you very much for raising it. Okay, I've got two members of the council wish to speak. I'll bring in Councillor Leslie Dedman first, and then go to Councillor Andy Hadley. Leslie.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you, Leader and the Deputy Leader, for the little bit of explanation. But I'm still worried that there's a lack of information in these papers, because this sale is going to affect all the residents of Christchurch and Highcliffe. And I think we need really good reasons, because as you clearly see, this might look very much like asset stripping. And there are lots of questions which need answering, and a lot of them have not been answered in this report. For example, Waitrose won't renew the lease unless they get the car park. Well, that's a big why. Their business in Christchurch is said to be not very good. How will getting the car park improve it? Because they already give free parking to shoppers. I wonder, do they want the car park to build a John Lewis at Home store in the car park and reduce the spaces? And what guarantee do we have that they'll stay for the 15 years that we quote? We've only got an option to buy back, as I read these papers, despite what Councillor Broadhead said about we can buy back at any time. I think we've only got 10 years. I will be corrected if I'm wrong. In the paper's risk assessment, there is a stated risk of a perceived loss of public parking. Well, it isn't a perceived loss, it is an actual loss of public parking. It will be a private car park. And I can go on now to the very detailed Christchurch Borough Council consultants report, which we had done in 2017. It was very detailed. It went to 2031. Now, this outside study says the increase in both the size and the age of population in Christchurch will increase demand for parking. Has this been taken into account? And how then is Christchurch going to deal with the pressure on the car parks caused by the closure of Bargates and Pitside car parks, where we stand to lose 150 spaces? Now, the 2017 study found that the proposed development of the police station site at Bargates and the loss of the car parks will increase parking pressure and thus reduce the number of visitors. Has this been ignored just at a time when this site actually has got planning permission after many years? There's a recommendation in this 2017 study that the bypass car park, which is the Waitrose car park, obviously, should be extended by the implementation of decking of another floor to provide another 120 spaces to alleviate the loss that I'm talking about of 150 spaces from Bargates and Pitside. Now, has this been dismissed, and if so, why? What's the difference now? The income from the bypass car park is considerable. How are we going to replace this? And I do wonder, as an aside, will any of the cash raised by the sale be channeled over to Christchurch? Is the sum mentioned as being raised by the sale the marriage value, because there will be an uplift to the supermarket when they have the car park added? And basically, as we all know, this administration says it's no need having to have a fire sale, and I don't like to think that we're having a fire sale. So I think there's loads of questions there, and this is why I had asked for it to come to ONS, and I'm disappointed that it won't come to ONS prior to coming to council. So I would like to know the mechanism as to how we can get it to ONS, please, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. What I'll do is there's a number of detailed questions there. So rather than go through the list of speakers, I'll respond to you directly, Leslie, and then we can bring further forward. Leslie, you may or may not have been at the start of this meeting where I openly committed to Councillor Bartlett that we would look to see at what point this would go. So to say that overview and scrutiny aren't going to get the opportunity before it goes to council isn't true, because I've committed to the fact that we'll have a discussion about that.
Well, Leader, can I just interrupt? I can't see how that's going to work, because the next council meeting, we're going to take it to a further council meeting then?
No, well, it's quite plausible if you're in a discussion with Chair of Overview and Scrutiny to work out how we can get a session of Overview and Scrutiny in that period. Or, and I did actually also say at the beginning of the meeting, what we could do is discuss with officers what the timeliness of this is and whether we move it to a later council meeting. So I can't be any clearer. And also this administration, you would have, again, and I mentioned to Councillor Hilliard earlier, I'm sure you'll agree, because the extent of all member briefings we've been brought forward, we are absolutely not looking to do anything without. I think we've set our tone for that. So I will work with Councillor Bartlett to try and work forward a solution. Okay, yeah. So there's a number of points. I'll just come back specifically. I'll do them chronologically. You talked about they already offer free parking, which they do, but it's an administrative issue, so they'll be more in control and easier to administer if they're if they're effectively the owners of that car park. But also it's a confidence issue. So effectively they know we could do whatever we wanted with that car park at the moment, and now they know they're going to have confidence that it's going to be a car park effectively. So I think it's quite obvious, what the benefit is for them to give them confidence to sign a new lease. They can't reduce the spaces. That's a detail in the agreement. You talk about also other opportunities. Could it become and I can't remember what you called it quite, Leslie, but some John Lewis thing in there. We can't have any loss of parking there, and we have the opportunity to buy it back. And also there's and in terms of the 10-year piece, there is a negotiation. Actually, I've been in negotiations in the last couple of days talking about the fine detail in this, and I alluded to that also in my introduction, that there are details to be decided, and that is still one of them. My expectation of our officers is that there's a permanency to that car park, and then we also have the covenant in there. There is no loss of public parking. You say it's not a public car park, but it still has to be a car park, or we have the opportunity to buy it back, and there's a covenant in place, a permanent covenant in place to take that. So I don't accept the argument, but it's not no longer a public car park. The people who are parking in there will be the public. And the last point, and I certainly don't like to be confrontational with you in particular, Leslie, but I find it perfectly quite rich to have somebody from Christchurch Borough Council and Dorset Council historically citing the lack of the car parking that was lost, which is absolutely nothing to do with BCP Council or this administration. That's something that largely the Christchurch Independent group, through being part of Christchurch Borough Council, delivered for the residents of Christchurch. So what we will be doing is looking to work at how we can bring forward the adequacy that Christchurch needs. One way of doing that is supporting the vibrancy of the high street, which we very much will look forward to doing, and believe this does some of that. So hopefully that answers some of your questions, and I'll move on to Councillor Andy Hadley. Andy.
Thank you, Leader. I guess for me, I'm ambivalent about the car parking particularly, but I am concerned about the sale of this asset and the idea that the new landlord, because Waitrose has a landlord, they're not actually the owner of the site, as in paragraph 2. What the difference is between the council being the landlord for the car park and the owner being the landlord being the landlord. I don't see that distinction. I don't see. And particularly supermarkets have done very well during the current pandemic. Are we really sure that they're just not keen to, with a very limited overage, to redevelop the site? It is obviously a waterfront on the river with the water meadows out. It's a very attractive site. So I appreciate what you just said about permanency, and I think we always, as a council, we always seem to do badly. We always seem to suffer extra costs from any developers when we try and intervene, and we seem to give stuff away. So I'll be really keen that it is permanent, or we don't sell it. And the overage, I think that's the term, is a permanency. So I'm concerned at the rate at which this is being done, and the details of the clauses, which I appreciate in the confidential element. Thank you. You're on mute, Leader.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, so Andy, just briefly, but we've talked about previously about there being no development unless we approve it. I've taken your points on board. In terms of the valuation piece around the site, it's a formal process in terms of how these sites get valued. So and obviously detail of that is in the confidential piece. But there's a strong value, it's a strong valuation exercise to get to that valuation. So thank you, Andy. I'll move to Councillor Hilliard. Paul.
Thank you, Leader. So like has been said, the paper, well, the sale of the car park was mentioned in the budget and medium-term plan, which I believe was either written in December or January. So I'm surprised it was a late paper and gave no time for overview and scrutiny to put it on their agenda. But hopefully the Cabinet will either postpone it or, as you've said, will make a mechanism for proper scrutiny. For me, I'm not going to repeat what's been said by the other members, but for me, residents remember what happened at Waitrose in Lymington, not far down the road, where there's barriers and it was customers only. So I think that's what residents would like to see going forward. It is for all residents and businesses. Business users use it as well. So there will be no restrictions on that. But so hopefully that's in the negotiations. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, and that's a good point, and we'll take that forward. So much appreciated. Okay, so now let me move on to the members of Cabinet to come in, and I've got Councillor Brooks. Nigel.
Yes, thank you, Leader. For those members and others who've joined the meeting late, I am the Cabinet Plus member for Christchurch Regeneration and also for BCP Retail Strategy. I think the important thing to realise here is the retention of jobs in Waitrose store in Christchurch. If we lose this store, this is a considerable number of employees who would actually move away from the area. And I think that has to be understood. I think the paper has been made clear by the leader and also by Councillor Broadhead, is that there is no loss of car parking. This car parking is secure, and the terms of the agreement make it clear that it will remain a car park. I have been through the heads of terms with the estates officers to fully understand the transaction, and I can assure members from Christchurch that this is secured. It is not actually going to change. I think wearing my retail strategy hat, looking from the perspective of Waitrose, and they have made it clear to the council that this is underperforming. They therefore want to actually secure their future. And I think that's an important consideration that we all need to understand. It also anchors the north end of the high street for Christchurch. If we actually see Waitrose go away from that site, it weakens the northern end, and that could have implication for all the businesses along Bargates and all the retailers along Bargates. So it's most important that this is actually properly understood. We have seen in other parts of Christchurch that there have been further discount supermarkets come into the mix. It is therefore important that we have a balance between the high end, and let's refer to Waitrose, and the discounters, that they actually have a suitable share of business. And by securing Waitrose in this location, we are doing exactly that. I'm pleased to say that the heads of terms recognises that there are interests that have to be secured for residents who live to the north of the site, who have to cross that site to actually get to their garages and to their parking spaces. All these matters have been considered, and I think it is a very good transaction to secure Waitrose for the future of Christchurch as we move forward. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much for that, Nigel, and also thank you for pointing out the points about access, which were fundamental and were brought forward by Councillor Peter Hall when we put those into the agreement, and I believe yourself when we discussed it. Thank you. Okay, so I'll go to Councillor Mike Green. Mike.
Thank you very much, Leader. And as you would expect, I went through this with a fine-tooth comb for exactly the same reasons, I think, as Councillor Dedman has identified. I wanted to be absolutely certain that there would be no loss of public car parking, and there will be no loss of public car parking. This is as Councillor Broadhead said when seconding the paper, was a principle that we brought forward under the Bournemouth Development Company, and that whenever there were to be a car park removed, then we would be replacing car parking spaces by at least the number that were lost and at modern day standards. It is unfortunate that during the previous administration that was not upheld in the case of Durley Road car park, but it has been the case under all the previous administrations in where car parks have been closed. So I think that, first of all, I wanted to provide that absolute assurance that, as far as I am concerned, as the Cabinet member responsible for transport, I am as comfortable as I possibly can be that there will be no loss of public car parking. And I think while we can't get into the confidential papers or the confidential discussions, if I may put it out there, why would Waitrose want this? Well, I think it's actually exactly the same that Councillor Dedman and I want to be assured. This is their way of ensuring that it will remain a public car park. The risk would have been there without the sale, that the council may choose to dispose of it in other ways. Now, whether that fear is justified or not, whether it has been over the previous, should we say, 22 months or so, they may have had that fear. This gives them the security, and what that does is to assure that Christchurch and Highcliffe residents referred to by Councillor Dedman will not be affected. They are protected, their car park is protected because of this transaction. So I hope that that will give some comfort. I would just, if you don't mind, Leader, just like to make one slight diversion to do with the points that have been made about the opportunity to move to for overview scrutiny, to be able to look at decisions in advance of coming to Cabinet and Council. And I think we're all very clear that we do want that opportunity to be there in decisions in general, and this one in particular, if it is in any way possible. But I think there is a flip side to that as well. And over the last, should we say, 2 or 3 council meetings, and possibly beyond that, is that there are members who seem to treat the full council meeting as an overview and scrutiny board. And I think that if we are going to ensure, as we should, the role of overview and scrutiny, the very important role that it carries out in examining and scrutinising decisions in advance of them being made, then there needs to be some balance on that. And that is that where the overview and scrutiny board has had that opportunity, that it is those debates, those questions are not re-asked when it comes to the full council meeting. And I think that would make things a lot better for all of us. And I hope that that would have the support of the Overview and Scrutiny Board Chairman, if we could find a way to make that happen. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Leader.
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you very much for that interjection. Okay, do we have any other cabinet members wishing to speak on this item? No, I don't see it. So I'll just sum up by saying, thanking again Councillor Bartlett for the interjection, and we will work together outside of this meeting. One point I didn't make in terms of the overarching, what will happen to the capital receipt if we get it, where will it be spent? Well, to some extent, it's a bit of a nebulous point, because with the amount of investment we were bringing forward in terms of the Futures Fund, the £50 million there, every area of the council, every area of our conurbation is going to be getting significant investment over and above the capital receipts generated. So hopefully that gives us all some confidence to the future. Okay, let's move to a vote. Does anybody wish to speak against the recommendation? Effectively, what we're doing is suggesting we take this to full council and then delegate to the portfolio holder, which is myself, to sign off the detail. No, I'm not seeing anybody raise. So what I'll do is move to. Sorry, I've got Mark Anderson raising. And Mark, I do apologise. I should have mentioned at the start of this paper, but you'd already declared that you weren't going to take part in this debate. So
thank you, Chairman.
That's what you're indicating. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got with a no taking part from Mark Anderson. Does anybody else wish to comment on this vote? No, then I look forward to. I'll take that as a unanimous decision. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much for the other council members who have been a part of this process as well. It's appreciated. So then that moves on to item 12, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. We've got the latest published forward plan is attached to the agenda. So if anybody has any comments on that, please raise now. I'm not seeing any comments, so all is left for me to do is to thank everybody, every member for their attendance today. Thank particularly the public who have looked into this meeting. It's really appreciated, and we very much look forward to seeing you again in our next Cabinet meeting next month. So thank you, everybody. Cheers.